Hello everyone, I'm selling my Mega Percussive Synthesizer. It's a Thomas Henry design, distributed by Synthcube. Barcode did the front panel PCB and Paper Noise did the panel. Some of you might know Paper Noise from his work on the Mutable Instruments modules. So what is the Mega Percussive Synth? It's a gigantic drum voice. It has three sections. The first is the shell, which is the sort of wooden body of the drum. The second is noise for generating snare and hi-hat sounds, and the third is the impact. Most notable about this unit is that I made some extra modifications so that each section could be triggered independently. You'll notice that the lock switch and the shell CV switch are no longer there. I found that those features were pretty much, I never used them. Lock just kept all of the voices on, and noise impact selected either the noise or the impact section to be routed into the shell CV, which I didn't personally find added a very large effect. So I replaced both of those with jacks so that the impact, being the lower one, can be triggered from that input, and noise, being the higher one, can be triggered from this input. So before, everything was just triggered from one input, and if we listen, you can hear the shell. Right now, this is the noise, and this is the impact. It's good for making sharp attacks. I found that I just never used all three of them at the same time. I'd usually either make some sort of bass drum or a snare, rarely ever all three at the same time. So what I ended up doing, we listened to all three. You can hear now. That's the wrong one. I just found that to be a much more useful use of 32 HP or whatever. This is a really big module, so having three voices come out of it instead of just one, with some parts of it being unused sometime, was much more useful to me. Now, this design does come with some caveats, the first of which being that the trigger for the impact generator is literally just hooked up to the VCA. So if I make the gate longer, you'll notice that the sound gets longer, whereas with the impact generator, there's a sort of gate to trigger converter happening before that, so you don't get that effect. Now, you can actually get some interesting stuff out of this, which is running it through an envelope, and the envelope will be hooked directly up to the VCA, so you can get different shapes than the ones that are intended. The downside of this being, of course, that if you use 5-volt triggers, your sound will be a lot quieter. There is another downside to this, which is that for whatever reason, high voltage on the impact VCA generates, or somewhat like dampens the audio coming through the noise generator. So if you listen here, we're getting clicks whenever the impact is coming through, and if I patch that to a LFO again, you'll hear that this is actually being dampened by the LFO. So I couldn't really figure out how to fix this. I didn't really see it as a huge problem except for these pops, but it actually kind of sounds interesting in some cases. As long as you keep the impact at very short lengths, the pops are not very noticeable. Now, if we listen to all three together, I can give you an overview of each sound. So this one is pretty straightforward. It's just basically you have your oscillator pitch, you have the decay of the drum, and then sweep is the amount that the decay envelope is sent to the pitch of the drum. So if we can listen to that, you can get very long drum sounds out of this. So a totally static pitch, and now the pitch moves with the decay envelope. Now here we have a ring mod section, which sounds pretty lovely. Here's the amount of ring mod. The balance of the ring mod, I believe, sends the carrier to both inputs. I'm not entirely sure, but it just sort of changes the timbre of the ring mod. And here's the frequency of the modulating oscillator. Focus on the panel, not on my hand. At first I kind of wanted to have CV over the ring mod frequency, but I found that having CV over the shell frequency was good enough because you're moving one of the frequencies against the other, so I'm driving that with an envelope now. Get some pretty awesome sounds out of that. Not necessarily a drum sound, but interesting nonetheless. Let's go to the noise. Here, as we take out the impact, there still is a pop. I think it's just inherent to the design, but my modification made it more noticeable. So, decay is pretty self-explanatory. Frequency is the frequency of this filter, and the filter is switchable between low pass and band pass. Resonance all the way up, and then down. The filter is significantly less noticeable. Sweep is sort of like this sweep in that, oh geez, sorry about that, in that the decay envelope is being sent to the frequency of the, I'm gonna just take this out. You hear that pop? I think it's just always there. So the decay envelope is sent to the frequency of the filter. So here you have basically a static filter with the sweep. You get some movement in the filter. Finally, we have impact, which is very similar to the first sound, except that there's no ring mod and it's a much shorter decay. Sweep, again, is the amount that the decay envelope gets sent to the pitch. Get some very good punchy sounds for a sharp attack. And make it a... You can get some really, really nice bass drum sounds out of this. Again, yeah. It's just what it sounds like with everything. There you have it. It's the Thomas Henry Mega Percussive Synthesizer in Eurorack. Now for sale.